The Sopranos is known to be one of the greatest drama series of all time. Whether it's the writing, the acting, the dark humor, or the deep psychology of the characters, the show has maintained a loyal fan base that is deeply dedicated to the series in ways not many other shows have. I mean, this show is about mobsters and it ended all the way back in 2006. It's not an epic space saga, or a medieval fantasy, or a story about how all these special needs kids got murdered at a boarding school. My point is that there's not some deep chasm of lore that the fans can get lost in, where there's a million planets with different languages and cultures and religions to study and understand. Usually these epic worlds naturally gain a loyal band of nerds that can speak Klingon or some shit. Yet despite being relatively grounded, the show of The Sopranos has its own version of geekdom. You got memes, quotations, theories, and so on that are repeated in every comment section of every video that even mentions the name of Tony Soprano.
All I know is you never had the makings of a varsity athlete.
Oh, son of a bitch!
Whole YouTube careers have been launched by discussing and dissecting the show's many nuances and unanswered questions. What happens after the cut to black? What happened to Furio after he went back to Italy? Was Ralphie the devil? What happened to the Russian? And of course, the most famous one of all, Billy Leotardo. Whatever happened there?
Whatever happened there?
God rest his soul, man.
The list of debated topics on this show is really long and can range from the smallest details to huge concepts. This makes it fun for the viewers because they can have hour-long conversations about tiny details that other people might have missed, as well as their own interpretation of those details. For example, there are plenty of implications of supernatural elements in the show. Tony sees pussy in the mirror, Paulie goes to a psychic that seems to know a lot more than he lets on, there's this guy, and her, and the Virgin Mary, and how Janice's wine glass moves on its own. Overall, though, these moments are shown in a way that makes them highly debatable. For example, you could argue that many of these moments are imaginations of the characters, whether it's a representation of their guilt or desire to be absolved of past sins. There is also the possibility of mistranslation from the creators to the viewers. This, for example, could just be some funny detail about skipping out on an awkward moment, or that Janice may have moved the tablecloth on her own, but the camera just didn't catch it. My point is that neither side is right or wrong in these debates. It's simply up to the viewer and their interpretation of the scene and what it means to them. Does the world of The Sopranos have some supernatural force that judges the characters and their misdeeds? Or is the world indifferent to their choices and it's the characters themselves that manifest this judgment? In either case, it's a very interesting topic that has sparked multiple debates from the online community and is simply one of the many reasons that the show is heavily discussed. And it seems to me that few other pieces of media are able to replicate these kinds of conversations. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. Why it feels like Hollywood has given up on the idea of ambiguity and mystery and storytelling. Number 1. More content. It feels like shows and movies these days don't seem to delve too deeply into ambiguity. We either get tightly written scripts that are more direct and leave little up to the realm of imagination, or we get stories that are so poorly written that the audience has to question everything they are watching because it's so hard to comprehend the sheer stupidity of the plot. A good example of a show that had the chance to be both ambiguous and mysterious was Stranger Things. In Season 1, the plot of the show is essentially a huge mystery. It has secret government experiments and conspiracies, alternate dimensions, supernatural abilities, and creepy monsters. The first season did an amazing job at both using these ideas to set up an interesting story, while also leaving enough questions to keep the audience's imagination in play as to what was really going on. None of the big story questions were ever explicitly answered. We were never told what the Upside Down was or what the US government was trying to do with it, but the show left us with many implications that could have left the audience debating for years. Unfortunately, the show continued, and we were eventually stripped of all the ambiguity and mystery of the first season. We are told exactly how the Upside Down came into being, which is in the most ridiculous way possible. The government's involvement is also explained away as simply an extension of the Cold War with the Russians. Having all of this explicitly told to us makes it immediately less interesting. This has irreversibly tarnished the show's overall reputation, and while it maintains a relatively popular following, I think that in hindsight people will say that this season's long television show should have been a miniseries. There won't be Reddit threads 15 years from now discussing theories and debating topics because the audience will already have the answers. Number 2. Keep it simple for stupid people. Another issue Hollywood has been having with mystery is that it often forces writers to treat their audience like adults instead of retarded little children. You know that voice that people use with the handicapped, like everything they say is some kind of revelation?
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, that's how a lot of scripts feel when they play out on screen. Just sit there in your big chair, you idiot, and eat your popcorn. Don't think, just shove more food in your face and enjoy the show.
It's undermining. And it's the kind of stuff I'm teaching my kids not to do. So I don't want to hear it again. End of subject.
Plots are made to be simple and easy to digest so that they can appeal to a wider audience. Companies now want simplicity. They don't want a psychological commentary on the viewer's own beliefs in the afterlife. Now some of you may be thinking, hey wait, J.J. Abrams and the hacks at Sad Robot use
mystery box
all the time. See, the difference between a
mystery box
style plotline and the ambiguity of The Sopranos is
mystery box.
Okay, we get it.
Mystery box.
Just shut up and let me explain.
Mystery box.
Abrams has described his own storytelling basically as using unanswered questions to drive the plot forward. The idea being that the mystery itself is the hook that keeps the audience invested in the story, even if the answer is secondary. In other words, it's a carrot and stick plot line. The mystery box is the carrot that drags the audience along, while Abrams holds a stick and threatens to beat the audience to death with it if they refuse to watch his shitty show. Remember Lost?
We have to go back, Kate.
No, Jack, we don't. We can watch Rings of Power now. It's pretty much the same idea.
Mystery box.
JJ's big TED Talk essentially boils down to keeping the audience in the dark by constantly feeding them new questions that leads to the next scene.
In terms of the content of it, you look at stories, you think, well, what are stories but mystery boxes? There's a fundamental question. In TV, the first act is called the teaser. It's literally the teaser. It's the big question. So you're drawn into it. Then, of course, there's another question, and it goes on and on and on.
His theory is that the more questions the audience has, the more likely they'll be invested in getting those questions answered. And therefore, they'll be more interested in seeing how the rest of the story plays out. This idea adds a lot of momentum to the plot because there's a constant feeling of some big revelation right around the corner. In other words, it's the suspense of the unknown. However, there's two big problems with this story format. A. Sometimes the revelations suck. Answering all of the viewer's questions can often feel underwhelming because of things like imagination and expectation. A lot of the time a viewer will have their own idea of what the answer to the plot's mysteries are. And guess what? The idea they thought of is their favorite. So if the writer came up with a different idea than the viewer, then the viewer is going to be disappointed.
Right, yeah, of course.
Remember in Lost how the smoke monster ended up being a manifestation of the Man in Black? Who was just some normal guy, but was made into a cloud of black smoke after being dropped into the heart of the island or some shit? Yeah, that was fucking dumb. And I bet none of the viewers watching the first episode of the show ever thought that there was this retarded-ass mythology behind the whole island's existence. The matter of fact is that no answer that the writers came up with would have been as interesting as alluding to different ideas while ultimately allowing the audience to decide for themselves. Mystery that is plot-driven is not as nearly as engaging as mystery that is driven by the characters. The Sopranos use mystery and ambiguity not to drag along the audience, but to further the audience's understanding of the characters. How characters reacted to the great mysteries of the show told more about themselves than what they were actually worried about. Like when Christopher wakes up from his coma and warns Tony and Polly about how he went to hell. Now, regardless of whether you think that this is some actual supernatural event or if it was imagined, what is more interesting is how both Tony and Polly react to the information. Polly spends the entire episode worrying about the afterlife and being haunted by ghosts, while Tony is instead confronted by his life as a mobster and his moral justifications for being an organized crime. Both men have spiritual struggles in the episode, yet differ heavily on what they dread and fear.
Fucking quiz!
It's a very revealing concept, and it makes no difference in the story if an afterlife actually exists or not. The interest in the mystery itself is more emotional and philosophical rather than being strictly driven by the plot. We don't need the answer because that's not the point of the mystery. It's not some cheap gimmick to dupe the audience into watching horrible romances on a beach in Hawaii. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I would like to see more shows and movies take some lessons from The Sopranos and add fun mysteries that the audience can get invested in that doesn't take up an entire plot or have awful explanations or payoffs. Sometimes it's best not to answer every little question that the audience has, and let them wonder a bit. Isn't that the whole point of storytelling at the end of the day? It's to take the viewer to a different place and let them imagine a world that they don't live in and probably will never experience. And while some of you may say curiosity killed the cat, I'll say that it was actually 12-year-old me stalking the streets of my neighborhood with a bag full of clear plastic and surgical tools.